Rates, Trans-Tasman Savings, Portability, Kiwisaver and Remedial Matters Bill, committee stage.
I declare the House and Committee for the consideration of the Taxation Annual Rates, Trans-Tasman Savings, Portability, Kiwisaver and Remedial Matters Bill. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker. Members, the House and Committee on the Taxation, Annual Rates, Trans-Tasman Savings, Portability, Kiwisaver and Remedial Matters Bill. Point of order, Chris Tremaine.
Point of order, Mr Chair. I seek leave for the committee stage of the Taxation, Annual Rates, Trans-Tasman Savings, Portability, Kiwisaver and Remedial Matters Bill to be taken as one question, notwithstanding Standing Order 333 and with unlimited calls.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there any objection? There is no objection. The question then is that Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, the clauses 1 and 2, Parts 1 to 5, Schedules 1 and 2 and clauses 1 and 2 stand part. No one taking the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Don't confuse politeness with indecision, Mr Power. Fair enough. The civility in the House is not dead, I'm pleased to say. Mr Chairman, this is a bill which Labor supports, but there are a number of important matters in it that bear the House considering in some detail. Mr Speaker, I wish to give notice that Labor will be introducing an SOP to this bill in the name of Stuart Nash, which will seek to exempt local authority rates from GST during the year of transition from the higher rate, and that follows from the massive 28-page government SOP, which is already being known as the whoops, we forgot about the changes on the way through breaking our promise SOP amendment. Mr Speaker, there are a number of important measures contained in this bill which are worthy of the whole House's consideration and support. Trans-Tasman portability of retirement savings has long been an issue which this government is now seeking to legislate on based on work started by the previous Labor administration. We commend them bringing that to a conclusion, and we want to thank our partners across the Tasman for facilitating an agreement on that matter. The bill introduces new rules for 18-year-olds seeking to enrol in Kiwisaver, flexibility in provisions applying to a resident cooperative company, effective cancellation of branch equivalent tax account debits around conduit-relieved dividends, a number of new rules around binding rulings which will be of interest particularly to the banking sector, exemptions from gift duty for gifts made to local or central government. And how interesting that is, particularly to read press reports about the Crayfer Farms deal, because the current government appears to be receiving gifts like $200,000 gifts from the consortium behind the Crayfer Farms deal. And if I might interrupt this, bipartisan broadcast to say what an outrage it is that this government is accepting that kind of, I hesitate to say bribe, but gratuity, that's why I hesitated.
Order. Point of order, Simon Power.
Chairman, the phrase just used by the member who resumed his seat in relation to a matter which has no bearing on this particular committee stage or the bill being considered by it is outside standing orders, and the member should withdraw and apologise for using that phrase.
Speaking to the point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, in the first instance, it can't be outside the scope of the bill because the bill contains an exemption for gifts made to central government. That was why I raised the point. But more importantly, sir, I used the phrase, I would hesitate to use a word, which I then did not use, so the Minister is rather jumping at shadows. I used the word gratuity, and I submit that that's not outside.
Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Simon Power.
Whilst I accept the member's first part of his explanation that he said, quote, something to the effect of "I would hesitate to use," it was the word that followed those introductory remarks which the members on this side of the House would have taken offence to. It was not the word gratuity. It was another word, and the member knows what it is, and he should apologise for using it.
I said, and I quote, "I would hesitate to use the word bribe, so I would call it a gratuity." So I did not, in fact, use the word bribe.
Order.
Nothing, therefore,
Order.
to withdraw.
Order. I just want to say to the member, that might be cute, but it doesn't cut the mustard. To simply say, I'm not going to say something and then utter the word is effectively the same thing. The member has condemned himself by his own words. The member will stand, withdraw and apologise.
Mr Speaker, withdraw and apologise. Mr Speaker, this bill is a very important bill because what it shows is that in the government breaking its promise not to raise GST, and there can be no doubt that it did make the promise and it did subsequently break it, they have fallen afoul of the huge complexity that is now falling on ordinary Kiwi business and households. And that's why Ernst & Young and other prominent consulting and accounting firms are saying things like last week from EY, quote, "As we face the harsh reality of the 1 October GST increase to 15%, many are realising that this is not a modest increase and the issues are actually more complex than anyone first imagined." And if anybody doubts the truth of that statement, one needs look no further than the Minister's own 28-page SOP, the "Whoops, we should have thought of this before we made the change" bill, which is very important that the House now addresses. Now that brings me to Mr Garrett. Mr Garrett has an SOP on Kiwisaver contribution rates, which Labour, after sincere thought, will be supporting. The SOP suggests that members of the public should have the choice to up their Kiwisaver contribution rate to 4%, 6% or 8%. Now, Mr Speaker, what's really interesting about this is there's no matching contribution from employers or the government. And we think that that is a matter of concern, although we don't oppose the choice. What we would note is that in the last 24 hours, the Minister of Finance, Bill English, has told the country that any changes recommended by the Savings Working Group to improve Kiwisaver must be revenue neutral. Well, hang on a second. If the government's not going to contribute to better incentives for savings, and they think a big, bold solution is required, and if the employer is not going to be contributing, as this SOP makes clear, then exactly who is? And the answer, sir, is logical: Kiwi households and businesses. Kiwi households, New Zealanders around the country, if they're not going to be incentivised, why would they pay more? One can only reach the interim conclusion, sir, that compulsion is coming to a town near you. Compulsion is coming from the government that railed against the nanny state. What is that? The granny state? Compulsory superannuation? The granny state? Has Crosby Textor thrown a loop somewhere? Has something gone wrong with the polling that the Minister's been doing? Mr Speaker, Mr Chairman.
I call
Mr Chairman, what has got into this government? Here is an SOP masquerading as a measure of more choice. At the same time, the Minister of Finance is saying no new incentives from the government, has to be fiscally neutral, and the government is making no moves towards improving employer contributions. That means only one thing. New Zealanders are going to be stuck with higher GST and compulsory savings from a paycheck that has hardly moved during the recession, and many people are without jobs. How many people? 159,000 people, 19,000 more than a couple of months ago. And Mr Speaker, it is absolutely clear in that context that there is no recovery hitting Main Street. It's not hitting Wall Street either, but it's certainly not hitting Main Street in the country towns and cities of New Zealand, because the dole queues are lengthening. Mr Speaker, the debate that the House is about to have on Kiwisaver and improving New Zealand's saving rates is indeed crucial. No more than that. fundamental. It's fundamental because New Zealand's international debt is approaching